This story is titled, My Parents Refused to Help Me Pay for Life-Saving Surgery, Choosing My Sister's Wedding Instead. Now they're begging me to save them from losing everything. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. All right, Reddit, buckle up, because this is going to be a long one. I've been sitting on this story for a while, but after what went down last week, I need to get this sham off my chest. Fair warning, this isn't some feel-good family reconciliation story. This is about karma finally catching up to people who deserve it. So I, 33, female, and I've spent the last 17 years of my life working construction. Started from the absolute bottom. We're talking pushing wheelbarrows full of concrete in 95-degree heat, hauling lumber up 3 flights of stairs kind of bottom. Now I run my own crews as a site supervisor, but we'll get to that part later. First, you need to understand where I came from, because that's what makes all this so up. Growing up in our house was like living in some twisted parallel universe where I was basically a ghost, while my younger sister Emma was treated like she discovered the cure for cancer every time she learned a new dance move. I'm not even exaggerating here. Our house looked like some kind of Emma shrine. Every wall, every shelf, every flat surface had some trophy, certificate, or photo of her achievements. Ballet recitals, piano competitions, spelling bee participation awards, you name it. It was displayed like a precious artifact in a museum. Me, I had exactly one photo in the house. One. It was from my high school graduation, tucked away in some dusty album that probably hasn't seen daylight since Obama's first term. And it's not like I was some deadbeat kid. I lettered in wrestling and powerlifting, maintained a solid B+ average while working part-time, never got in trouble with the law, but in my parents' eyes, that was just expected. No praise, no celebration, just a nod and maybe a good job if they were feeling particularly generous that day. I started hitting the weights hard in sophomore year, partly because of wrestling, but mostly because I needed somewhere to put all that anger. The gym became my sanctuary. While Emma was getting private piano lessons and dance tutorials, I was in our garage with a rusty bench press and some secondhand dumbbells I bought with my own money from mowing lawns. My old man never once spotted me, never showed any interest in what I was doing. He was too busy videotaping Emma's dance performances or whatever. You know what really gets me? I can count on one hand the number of times my parents showed up to my matches. 3 out of 4 years of varsity competition. They always had some excuse. Emma had a recital. Emma had a competition. Emma needed help with her homework. I won the state championship in my weight class senior year. Neither of them was there. Why? Emma had an audition for some summer dance program. She ended up quitting after 2 weeks. Anyway, by the time I hit 16, I was already working construction during summer breaks. Not because I had to. We weren't poor or anything. My old man had some cushy office job in management, and Mom worked part-time as a real estate agent. Nah, I worked because I wanted to be anywhere but home. The guys on the site became more of a family to me than my actual family. They taught me everything. How to read blueprints, how to operate machinery, how to tell when someone's trying to cut corners that could get people killed. Most importantly, they taught me what it means to have someone's back. I moved out the day after high school graduation, got a full-time position with the construction company I'd been working summers for, rented a tiny studio apartment that barely fit a bed and a mini fridge. My parents barely noticed. They were too busy planning Emma's sweet 16 party, which, by the way, cost more than my first year's rent. The next few years, I busted my ass learning everything I could about construction. Started as a laborer, moved up to carpenter's assistant, then carpenter, then lead carpenter. By 25, I was running my own crew. The guys respected me because they knew I'd done every job I was asking them to do. I wasn't some college kid with a clipboard telling them how to work. I was right there in the trenches with them, getting just as dirty, lifting just as heavy. Meanwhile, Emma went off to some expensive private college. Guess who paid for that? Changed her major 3 times and finally settled on communications or marketing or some other shiny degree. Every time she came home, it was like the second coming of Christ. Mom would cook these elaborate meals. Dad would clear his schedule to spend quality time with her. Me. I got a text on my birthday if they remembered. But you know what? All that lies made me stronger. Every ignored achievement, every missed match, every time they chose her over me, it all just fueled the fire. I turned that anger into gains at the gym, into focus at work, into drive to succeed despite them. Not because of them. By the time everything went sideways with my health, I was benching 225 for reps, deadlifting 405, and running crews that finished projects ahead of schedule and under budget. So there I was at 28, crushing it at work, hitting new PRs at the gym every month, and finally feeling like I had my cannot get together. I'd worked my way up to site supervisor at one of the biggest construction companies in the area. Had my own apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Was even thinking about maybe starting my own business down the line. I'd recently met Kieran through a supplier we used. Quiet, sharp, the kind of project engineer who actually listened to field crews. We grabbed coffee after a site walk once, talked shop, laughed more than I expected. I didn't know it then, but he'd become a lot more important later. Then life decided to remind me it's got a mean right hook. It started with this weird pain in my chest, not like heartburn or muscle strain. This was different. At first, I brushed it off. You work construction long enough, random aches and pains become like background noise. Plus, I was that typical meathead who thought being tough meant ignoring when your body's trying to tell you something's wrong. Stupid looking back on it. The real wake-up call came during a deadlift session. I was going for a new PR, 425 pounds. Everything felt solid during warm-ups, but as soon as I started pulling that weight, it felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was tightening it with every breath. Had to bail on the lift. Me, the woman who once finished a wrestling match with a dislocated shoulder, had to drop the bar and sit down because I couldn't breathe. My buddy Mark from the crew, same guy who taught me everything I know about concrete work, practically dragged my stubborn ass to the ER. Thought it was just going to be some pulled muscle or maybe a pinched nerve. Nope. After what felt like a million tests and scans, Doc comes in with that look on his face. You know, the one where they're trying to stay professional, but you can tell they're about to drop a bomb on you. Turns out I had this tumor pressing against my lung. Not the kind they can just cut out and be done with it either. We're talking major surgery, followed by treatments that sounded like they came straight out of a sci-fi movie. The kind of tissue that makes you realize all those hours in the gym, all that protein powder and creatine don't mean jack when your own body decides to turn against you. But here's the real kicker, the cost. Remember how I mentioned I was doing well at work? Yeah, well, construction companies aren't exactly known for their amazing benefits packages, no health insurance, and being the young, invincible dumbass I was, I hadn't bothered getting private coverage. Why waste money on insurance when I could spend it on supplements and new lifting gear, right? God, I was so stupid. The numbers the hospital threw at me might as well have been in Monopoly money. Surgery alone was going to cost more than I made in 2 years. Then add in all the treatments, medications with names I couldn't even pronounce, follow-up care. We're talking enough money to buy a house in some states. And they wanted it up front, or at least proof I could pay. Welcome to American healthcare, right? I tried everything I could think of first. Called every insurance company, but pre-existing conditions were still a shinish back then. Looked into medical trials, but none were accepting new patients. Even checked out those medical tourism websites about getting treatment in Mexico or India, but the doctors shot that down real quick. Said I needed to start treatment like yesterday. My crew, man, those guys were amazing. Mark started a GoFundMe right away. The other guys were offering to donate vacation days, sick leave, whatever they could. Even the old-timer who'd been busting my balls since day one about wearing sunscreen, skin cancer, came by with an envelope full of cash he'd been saving for a new Harley. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. The numbers were just too big. We're talking 6 figures here. And time wasn't on my side. Every day I waited, this thing in my chest was growing, making it harder to breathe, harder to work, harder to even get through a normal day without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. Lost 15 pounds in the first month just from stress and not being able to eat right. Had to drop down to light duty at work because I couldn't handle the heavy lifting anymore. Every breath felt like I was trying to suck air through a coffee stirrer. Nights were the worst. Lying there in the dark, feeling this thing inside me, wondering if each breath might be the one where my lung finally gives out. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. After years of being the independent one, the one who never needed help, the one who'd built everything from scratch, I had to swallow my pride and go ask my parents for help. They weren't rich, but they had savings, good credit, a paid-off house. Plus, they were my parents. The people who are supposed to have your back when hits the fan. It was a Tuesday evening when I drove to my parents' house. Remember that clearly because I'd just gotten my latest test results that morning and the doc was pushing hard for us to schedule the surgery ASAP. I'd lost another 10 pound celebs that month. My work jeans were hanging off me like I was some teenager trying to look cool. Chest pain was getting worse to the point where I had to take breaks walking up a single flight of stairs. Their house looked exactly the same as it always had. Real estate prices in their neighborhood had doubled since they bought the place. They were sitting on at least $500,000 in equity alone. I sat down in the chair across from them, trying to ignore how my chest felt like it was in a vice grip. Started explaining everything. The diagnosis, the timeline, the costs. Showed them all the paperwork from the hospital, the treatment plans, everything. Even had a letter from my doctor explaining how urgent this was. My hands were shaking the whole time, but not from the illness. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, asking them for help. You know what they did while I was laying all this out? Mom kept glancing at her phone like she was waiting for a more important call. Dad just sat there with his arms crossed. That same look on his face he used to get when I'd tell him about my matches, like he was tolerating an annoying sales pitch. When I finally finished talking, there was this long silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl. Then Mom and Dad did this thing they always did. This little look between them like they were having a whole conversation without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and dropped the bomb. We can't help you with that, Cheryl. We've already committed our savings to Emma's wedding. I thought I'd misheard him at first, like maybe the tumor had spread to my brain or something. But nope, he just sat there looking at me like he'd told me they couldn't lend me $20 for gas. The wedding? I remember my voice cracking. Not from emotion, from straight-up disbelief. You're choosing a party over my life. Mom jumped in then, all smooth and calm, like she was explaining something to a child. It's not just a party, Cheryl. This is Emma's special day. We've already put down non-refundable deposits. The venue alone was $30,000. $30,000 for a venue. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there literally dying, needing surgery that could save my life, and they're worried about their precious Emma's Instagram perfect wedding. I could die without this surgery, I said it slow, making sure they understood exactly what they were doing. This isn't me asking for help buying a car or starting a business. This is life or death. Dad actually had the balls to shrug like he was dismissing a waiter who'd brought him the wrong appetizer. You've always been resourceful, Cheryl. You'll figure something out. This is Emma's time. We can't let her down. That's when it hit me. All those years of being the forgotten daughter, all those missed events, all those times they chose her over me. It wasn't just them being busy or distracted. They genuinely valued her happiness over my life. Their daughter could literally die, and they were more concerned about their other daughter having the perfect wedding photos. I got up to leave, my legs barely holding me up. Mom actually had the nerve to say, "Don't be dramatic, Cheryl. There must be some payment plan you can work out with the hospital." Payment plan, like I was buying a dishwasher or something. The last thing I remember before walking out was looking at that wall of Emma's photos. All those smiling faces, all that money spent making sure their precious daughter had everything perfect. And there I was, their daughter, walking out of their house knowing I meant less to them than a party. That was the last time I spoke to them for almost 5 years. The next few months after my parents chose a wedding over their daughter's life were pure hell. Not the metaphorical kind. I'm talking actual physical wondering if you'll wake up tomorrow kind of hell. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, you've got nothing left to lose. And sometimes that's exactly what you need to find out who you really are. First thing I did after leaving their house was drive straight to work. It was already dark, but I knew Mark would still be there finishing paperwork. Guy's been running night crew for 15 years. Found him in the site office doing what he always does, cursing at Excel spreadsheets and drinking coffee that could strip paint. Told him everything. Not gonna lie. Broke down halfway through. Here I am, 5'7", 170, well, more like 150 by then, crying like a baby in a construction trailer. Know what Mark did? Didn't say a word. Just got up, locked the office door. Then he picked up his phone and started making calls. By midnight, we had a plan. Not a good one, but when you're drowning, you don't complain about the quality of the rope. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital payment negotiations, loan applications, and picking up every extra shift I could physically handle. The crew, my real family, stepped up in ways I still can't talk about without getting choked up. These folks, most of them living paycheck to paycheck themselves, somehow scraped together almost $15,000 for my treatment fund. Miguel, our master carpenter, who'd been sending half his paycheck to family in Mexico, handed me an envelope with $2,000 in cash, said his kids could wait another year for their PlayStation. Big Pete, who everyone thought was just a stereotypical musclehead concrete specialist, turned out to be a whiz at organizing fundraisers. Man got the local gym to host a bench press competition, convinced local businesses to donate prizes, raised another $8,000 in one weekend, but it still wasn't enough, not even close. The surgery alone was going to cost over $80,000, and that's before adding in all the other treatments. So I did what I had to do. Sold my truck, the one I'd spent 2 years restoring on weekends, sold my custom PC, sold every piece of gym equipment I owned, even sold my grandfather's watch, the only thing he'd ever left me. That one hurt the most. Meanwhile, I was still trying to work as much as possible, even though by this point I could barely make it through a 4-hour shift without feeling like I was breathing through a straw. The tumor was growing, pressing harder against my lung. Every breath felt like trying to inflate a balloon inside a box that's too small. Lost another 15 pounds. My work boots stopped fitting because my feet were swelling from the fluid retention. The worst part? Seeing Emma's wedding preparations all over social media. My parents were posting constant updates about venue tastings, flower arrangements, dress fittings. Each post was like a knife in the gut. The flower budget alone could have covered one of my chemotherapy sessions. The designer dress they bought her probably cost enough to pay for my first round of treatment. Then came the wedding invitations. Well, not to me, obviously. I heard about them from a cousin who still talked to me. Apparently they were these elaborate things with gold foil and custom calligraphy. Cost like $15 per piece. They ordered 200 of them. Do the math on that one. $3,000 on shouting paper that most people would throw away while I was working security shifts at a warehouse between my regular job, barely able to breathe. But here's where the story takes a turn you might not expect. Remember that GoFundMe that Mark started? It caught the attention of one of our suppliers, big commercial construction materials company. Their CEO had lost his brother to the same type of cancer I had. Guy calls me personally one morning, says he wants to help. Next thing I know, they're offering to cover 40% of my medical costs through their corporate charitable foundation. That was the break I needed. Between that, the loans I'd taken out, everything I'd sold, and what the crew had raised, I finally had enough to schedule the surgery. Had to drain my 401k, max out 3 credit cards, and sign up for a payment plan that'd take years to pay off. But I was going to live. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days before Emma's wedding. Not that they knew or cared. They were too busy with final dress fittings and rehearsal dinners. I went into that operating room alone. Well, not really alone. Mark took the day off to drive me there. Miguel's wife made me a care package of homemade tamales for after the surgery. Big Pete organized the crew to cover all my shifts for the next month. You want to know true family? It's not the people who share your DNA. It's the folks who work overtime so you can make rent while you're recovering. It's the rough-handed carpenter who sits in a hospital waiting room for 12 hours straight, just so you don't wake up alone. It's the crew that passes around a hard hat collecting dollars and quarters because every bit helps. Kieran showed up too. Quiet, no grand speeches. He brought a small stack of project binders I'd been worrying about and said, "I'll handle these. Focus on breathing." Then he waited with Mark, eyes red but steady, until they wheeled me in. I made it through the surgery, spent 2 weeks in the hospital, another month recovering at home. The crew took turns checking on me, bringing food, helping with basic stuff I couldn't do while I was healing. Kieran stopped by on Sundays with grocery runs, and that dry humor of his that somehow made the pain meds feel optional for an hour. Not once did my phone ring with a call from my parents or Emma. They were probably too busy posting wedding photos on Instagram. Recovery was a sí. Anyone who's been through major surgery knows what I'm talking about. That feeling where even breathing feels like you're learning a new skill. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. Once you start climbing back up, you realize just how strong you really are. And man, did I climb. The first few months were rough. Lost most of my muscle mass. Couldn't lift more than a gallon of milk without feeling like my chest was going to explode. But you know what? Every morning I woke up breathing was a middle finger to the people who'd left me for dead. Started small, walking to the mailbox, then around the block, then actual cardio. Rebuilt myself one painful step at a time. Mark and the crew kept me on light duty, mostly supervising and doing paperwork. Wasn't much, but it kept me in the game. Started learning the business side of construction. Contracts, bidding, project management. Turns out when you can't lift heavy sawing anymore, your brain starts working overtime. Who knew? About a year after the surgery, I got an unexpected call from that CEO who'd helped with my medical bills. Guy wanted to meet for coffee. Figured he was just checking up on his investment, making sure I hadn't died or whatever. Nope. Turns out he'd been watching how I handled everything. The recovery, the work, the crew management. Offered me a position as a project manager for their commercial division. Better pay, full benefits, finally. And most importantly, a chance to learn how the big boys play. I took that opportunity and ran with it like I was being chased. Spent the next few years absorbing everything I could about commercial construction. Nights, weekends, didn't matter. While Emma was posting about her perfect suburban life and my parents were bragging about their country club membership, I was building something real. Kieran and I started seeing each other for real somewhere in the middle of all that. No grand gesture, just steady presence turning into something I could lean on. He knew when to push me to rest and when to hand me a set of drawings and say, "I want your eyes on this phasing plan." The first time I laughed so hard my chest hurt, in a good way, it was because he tried to explain BIM to Miguel and ended up drawing stick figures on a pizza box. We didn't rush it. I was still rebuilding. Body, career, trust. He kept showing up. So did I. Started small at first. Took some of the smaller projects nobody else wanted. You know, the ones where the margins are tight and you gotta get creative. Learned every trick in the book about maximizing efficiency without cutting corners. My crews loved me because I'd actually been in their boots, known what it's like to bust your ass in 100 degrees heat for barely more than minimum wage. By year 3, I was handling multi-million-dollar projects. Remember that tumor that nearly killed me? Used that experience to specialize in medical facility construction. Turns out hospitals love working with someone who understands their world from both sides. Started making connections, building relationships, the kind of networking you can't fake because it comes from shared experience. Then I got the project that changed everything. A $50 million medical center renovation. Biggest job I'd ever managed. Spent 6 months planning it down to the smallest detail. The project was a massive success. Came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Got written up in some industry magazines. Won a few awards. Suddenly, I wasn't just some construction woman anymore. I was an innovative voice in medical facility design or some nay like that. Started getting calls from other healthcare systems wanting to work with us. Meanwhile, life at home got better too. Kieran moved a set of mugs into my kitchen. Temporarily, then forgot to take them back. We got married last year. Small ceremony, just close friends and my real family, the crew. Mark cried. Big Pete wore a tie that didn't match anything and made it work. Miguel's kids threw flower petals like confetti cannons went off. I walked down an aisle we'd built ourselves in a warehouse we'd decked with string lights and sawhorses. It was perfect. Everything was going great. Then about 6 months ago, I started hearing rumors through the industry grapevine. Rumors about my parents. Remember that fancy country club they'd been bragging about for years? The one where Dad loved to drop my name like he'd been the proud architect of my success? Yeah. Turns out he and a few of his golf buddies had gotten tangled up in some can't-lose real estate investment scheme. You know the type. Glossy brochures, luxury developments, promises of huge returns, minimal risk, all that. Only this time it wasn't just a bad investment, it was catastrophic. At first, I didn't pay much attention. People make bad financial choices all the time, but then I started noticing the signs. The Mercedes Dad was so obsessed with? Gone. Mom's Instagram, usually full of photos from charity luncheons and garden parties, went quiet. A cousin mentioned in passing that my parents were downsizing, though she said it in that tone people use when they really mean losing everything. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was in the middle of reviewing bids for a new hospital project, but something, maybe instinct, made me pick up. Cheryl, came the voice on the other end, soft, cracked, desperate. It's your mother. For a second, I didn't recognize it. She sounded smaller, like all the air had been let out of her. Hi, I said slowly. It's been a while. There was a tremor in her breath. We need to talk. It's important. That phone call was the start of everything unraveling. Turns out their small financial trouble was more like the Titanic after meeting that iceberg. The investment Dad got involved with wasn't just bad, it was criminally bad. The FBI was investigating. The partners had vanished overseas. Every dime they'd invested, gone. And here's the kicker. They'd mortgaged their house, cashed out their retirement accounts, even taken out additional loans. And now, foreclosure was weeks away. But here's where it gets darkly poetic. Their first call wasn't to Emma, not the golden child, not the daughter whose wedding they'd gutted their savings to fund. Nope. They called me, the forgotten one, the daughter they'd left to die when helping me meant missing a photo op at the country club. You'd think Emma would have been their safety net, right? The favorite child, married to some fancy corporate lawyer in a gated community. But Mom's voice cracked when she told me the truth. They went to Emma first, she whispered. She said it wasn't her responsibility. I blinked. What do you mean? She had her husband answer the door. He told us they couldn't risk having our financial problems affect their children's future. Then he gave us the number of a bankruptcy attorney and shut the door. I let out a humorless laugh. Wow. All those years you spent choosing her, and now she can't even let you in the house. Mom's voice broke. Please don't be cruel. We've made mistakes. We need help, please. How much? I asked, my voice flat. 50,000, she whispered, just to catch up on the mortgage and hold off foreclosure. 50,000. The same amount they'd spent on Emma's wedding photographer and videographer. I remembered the posts, the drones, the cinematic highlight reel, the champagne toast under fairy lights, the video they'd called an investment in memories. What does Emma say about all this? I asked, already knowing the answer. Silence. She says she and her husband are focused on their children's education, Mom said finally. They can't risk helping us. But you think I should? Her tone sharpened, a flash of her old self. We're your parents, Cheryl. We raised you. I laughed, cold and low. You raised Emma. You tolerated me. That's not fair, she snapped. It's not? My voice cracked despite myself. When I needed you, when I was dying, you said you couldn't help because you had commitments. You chose a wedding over your daughter's life. But now that you're the one sinking, suddenly I'm family again? There was a long silence, then a faint shuffle. Your father wants to speak with you. Of course he did. Cheryl? Dad's voice came through, brittle but trying for authority. What's past is past. We need to think about the future, about family. Family, I repeated. You mean that word you use when you need something? Don't be like this, he said. We're asking for help. You've done well for yourself. You can afford it. I stared out my office window at the skyline. Yeah, Dad, I can. You know why? Because when you abandoned me, I learned how to survive without you. I built something real. I worked while I could barely breathe. I fought for every inch of the life you threw away. Cheryl, tell me, I cut in. When Emma's husband slammed the door in your face, did it hurt? Did it feel like someone ripped your heart out? Like everything you sacrificed was for nothing? The line went silent. Now you know how I felt. The next morning, I got a call from the bank handling their mortgage. Apparently, I was still listed as their emergency contact. Funny, considering they'd erased me from every family photo years ago. The bank rep explained they were moving forward with foreclosure unless someone intervened. I told them I'd get back to them. That Saturday, I made a decision. I called my parents and told them to meet me at one of my job sites. Told them to be there at 7 a.m., sharp. When they arrived, they looked smaller, tired. Mom's hair was unstyled, her clothes wrinkled. Dad's face had that hollow look people get when the ground's just been ripped out from under them. Why are we here? Mom asked, trying to sound firm, but failing. I gestured around. See this building? I said. The morning light caught the glass facade of the new medical center, still under construction. This is mine, my project. It exists because I survived. Not because of you, in spite of you. Dad frowned. We didn't come here for a lecture. No, I said quietly. You came here to understand something. I pulled up my banking app on my phone. You need $50,000 to save your house. That's less than what you spent on Emma's wedding flowers. Mom flinched. Are you going to help us or not? Dad asked, a flash of his old arrogance showing through. I smiled faintly. You remember Mark? The foreman who drove me to the hospital when you wouldn't? He and the crew, these men who make a fraction of what you used to make, scraped together their paychecks to help me stay alive. That's family. That's loyalty. They showed me what love looks like. Mom's lip trembled. We said we're sorry. No, I said. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you need something from me now. Dad's voice rose. We're your parents. And I was your daughter, I snapped, until the day you chose a wedding over my heartbeat. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Finally, I sighed. You want the truth? I could write that check right now and not even feel it. But I won't, because some debts can't be repaid with money. Mom started crying, hands shaking. We'll be homeless. I shrugged. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. Isn't that what you told me when I was dying? Then I turned to leave. Oh, and Dad, I said over my shoulder, you were right. Family does help family. That's why you're on your own. I walked away while they stood there, surrounded by the sound of drills, saws, and real people building real things, something they'd never understand. 2 months later, I got word they'd lost the house. Emma still wouldn't take their calls. They were living in some extended stay motel on the edge of town. The country club crowd had long since vanished. And me? I signed another multi-million-dollar contract for a hospital expansion. Kieran and I are expecting our first child. Life's good. Sometimes karma takes her time, but when she finally shows up, she builds with precision.